Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. I'm Sebastian Fonseca. Can you do me a real quick favor? Like this video, subscribe to the channel to get all your latest content with Spectator Sports. I greatly appreciate it. It just does a massive plus to help with the YouTube algorithm. For this episode, I'm going to be recapping the NBA Finals now that the Golden State Warriors are the NBA champions. Talk about Steph and his legacy and how he stacks up amongst the greats, how the Warriors organization outlook is going forward, and the Celtics and what they can do to improve and maybe get back to this stage in the future, and also KD and maybe his regret about leaving Golden State. The Golden State Warriors are now back atop the NBA mountain once again, and what a journey it's been just this season alone. To start, especially with everything that they overcome in terms of injuries to all three of their major cogs with Steph, Clay, Draymond, and now that everybody's been healthy, they put it all together and it's been great, and they got everything to fire on all cylinders, and again they're NBA champions for the fourth time in 8 years. A truly remarkable feat. For Game 5, the Warriors got key contributions from other players not named Steph Curry, who actually did have an off night. This was the first time Steph has not been able to make a three-point field goal in the playoffs in his entire career, and the first time since 2018 that he's made a three-pointer, and this snaps his streak of 233 consecutive games making a three-point field goal. Guys like Andrew Wiggins definitely stepped up. If there was a Game 5 MVP, easily goes to him for what he did in terms of putting up 26 points, 13 rebounds, and the defense he played on Jason Tatum. Truly remarkable in terms of what he's able to do on both sides of the court. The Warriors got off to an early lead in the first half. They had a double-digit lead going into halftime, but the Celtics this time responded with a huge third quarter of their own, even briefly taking the lead towards the end of the quarter. But Jordan Poole made yet another deep three-pointer to return momentum back in Golden State favor. And Draymond kind of harped on this in his podcast where, you know, when you do all that work and you take the lead, but then only for it to go away so quickly, especially towards the end of the quarter, it's kind of like a wrap-up at that segment of the game, and that's really deflating, and it kind of turned everything around. The crowd was energized on Golden State's side, and it just really deflated the bench for Boston. In the fourth, every time the Warriors needed a three-pointer, they got it from other guys like Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, even Jordan Poole, and Tatum just continued to show his decline as the game wanes on. He starts off quarters, first quarter, second quarter is really strong, has put up a few double-digit outputs to go into halftime, but in the fourth quarter, his shooting percentages dipped quite a bit, and he's been shooting less than 30% going into Game 6, and again, it reflected it in Game 5 where he shot 1 for 4. Kind of scored a garbage time three-pointer, and yes, he made some free throws, but in terms of field goal percentage, he did not have it at all. And Game 5 was taken by Golden State. Game 6, all the pressure goes back to Boston. They're playing on their home court, and they needed to win and to stave off elimination and send the series back to the Bay for a Game 7. They started off really strong, starting off the quarter on a 14-2 run, and they were energized by the Boston crowd, making even 3 three-pointers to start off in. I was definitely a little worried that if they continued this was going to be over quite quickly and we would have a Game 7. The Warriors rode out the storm, and they took a 5-point lead going into the second quarter with threes from Steph Curry, Jordan Poole, even Clay chipped in too. The Warriors rode out the storm, and they took a 5-point lead going into the second quarter and continued that on a 21-0 run and turning a deficit into a 15-point lead. And it was pretty much over from there. The Celtics never really truly recovered from that point. They trailed by 15 going into halftime, and they started off the second half pretty strongly, mainly led by Al Horford, who seemed like the only Celtic really passionate and showed a lot of fight. It didn't seem like Tatum wanted any part of it, or even Jaylen Brown or Marcus Smart to start off, but the aggressor was Al Horford for sure. He made 3 3-pointers in that quarter, blocked a shot, and they cut that lead down to single digits, and they certainly had some type of momentum going into that fourth quarter, and the crowd was back in it, essentially bring this team back and try to force a game 7. Every time the Boston Celtics made a 3, the Warriors came right back and made a 3 of their own, and it wasn't even just Steph, it was Jordan Poole, it was even Draymond. He made 2 3-pointers, even having his best offensive output for the entire series, coming up with 12, 12, and 8. And this performance really paid big dividends for the Warriors, especially when he's making jump shots. It's really demoralizing for the Celtics, unfortunately. And despite Jaylen Brown finishing with a game-high 34 points, a lot of those points came up when they were really from behind, and his turnovers played a huge role in it as well. The thing I think he needs to work on in this offseason is really driving left. I've seen this now countless times where his handles are being tested in terms of at least driving to get into the paint, where he is a great finisher, but the problem is getting from point A to point B from the perimeter to the paint. He struggles with that, and he's been stripped. The ball either goes off his foot, whatever have you, and that leads to turnovers and fast break opportunities the other way. And with the Warriors, they don't just get fast break 2s, they get fast break 3s, and those are just devastating, and they can hit you really fast, really hard. This happened to the Celtics, where every time they had more than 15 turnovers in a game, they lost every one of those games except one this postseason. The teams that have won the turnover battle in this series at least has won the game. This does come up with lack of experience in terms of the finals, but the Celtics core has made deep postseason runs before. I mean, Jason Tatum made conference finals appearance in his rookie year. He made one 2 years later in his third year in the NBA, and he's made the postseason ever since. So I wouldn't say there's a lack of experience in terms of the entire postseason. You could say the finals are a whole different animal, but regardless, taking care of the ball is a very fundamental thing, and a team like Golden State is going to pounce on those opportunities, and they did. That lead ballooned up to 22 points somewhere through the third quarter, and despite, like I said, a few little runs from Jaylen Brown and Al Horford, the Celtics never really got a chance to get back into this game, and the Golden State Warriors became the 2022 NBA champions. And this really culminates a really fascinating season. I mean, after taking a couple years away from the postseason, the Warriors transitioned from Oakland to San Francisco, and they opened up their Chase Arena. And given that their owners are really savvy, I mean, they've turned that franchise into the most valuable franchise in all of the NBA, even more valuable than the Los Angeles Lakers. With that, they managed to sell off a portion of their arena and use that stake to invest in a core or role players at least to help Steph Curry. They knew he had plenty left in the tank, and they decided to invest their draft capital, assets as well, contracts. And now, yes, there's a salary cap, but teams go over the salary cap all the time. They just have to pay luxury tax. So they're prepared to pay that luxury tax, and I hope that they do offer guys like Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole, the bag per se, because they deserved it, they earned it, and their postseason contributions have been big for this run, especially in 2022. Wiggins definitely has been the second best player in this finals, and I'm talking about across the board, just because what he's done on both ends of the floor, and now this extra dimension in terms of rebounding has been truly phenomenal. I mean, he was attacking the glass, either it was on putbacks or on the defense, and then he's leading breaks. And I remember in Game 5 where he guarded somebody on the perimeter, and then immediately charged to the paint to box out, get the rebound, dribble it up court, and just in time he dished it out to Jordan Poole, and he took the three to make it, and that led to that go-ahead three, and that really deflated the Celtics. And that's a microcosm, and what are the small things that he can do. And for, again, a guy that was drafted number 1 overall but went to such a dysfunctional franchise that is the Minnesota Timberwolves. If you put somebody in a position to succeed in a well-run organization, it's just going to pay really big contributions, and he rewarded them. I mean, they believed in him. They asked him to do things that he's comfortable with and what he's been proven to do. He's not a number 1 op. Should be expected for somebody who is a number 1 overall pick, and maybe he was drafted too high, but that doesn't mean he's a bust. He's a great player. He made an all-star team this year, and I expect him to make some type of defensive player, the all-first team, all-defense, maybe sometime later in his career. Wiggins deserves the bag, that's for sure. So I hope the Warriors end up paying him and keeping this core and other role players around him for Steph's legacy. Moving on to now the newly crowned Finals MVP, Steph Curry. Again, he was touted as a guy who was carried by Kevin Durant. He was not the leading force behind the 2015 title, even though he was the leading scorer and did struggle early on in 2015. But I did feel like, looking back retrospectively, he deserved the Finals MVP, but voters voted for Iguodala. Nothing wrong there. But now he gets this Finals MVP trophy, and now he becomes part of a class amongst himself. I mean, he's a multiple time MVP winner. He's won All-Star Game MVP, and now he has a Finals MVP, and multiple time All-Star, the three-point king. And now this really puts him in the class of his own, as well as not only the best shooter, but arguably the best point guard of all time. For the Celtics side of the things, the problem is that they don't really have a true point guard. Using Marcus Smart as their primary ball facilitator, which I do think he's great on the defensive end. I mean, he's one of only 2 point guards to ever win the Defensive Player of the Year award. But him as a primary ball facilitator in terms of making decisions and organizing the offense hasn't turned into great outputs for the Celtics. I mean, he literally shot them out of the game almost in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals and was a turnover machine. And I don't really trust him to take care of the ball when it really matters. And maybe they should really look into guys like Jalen Brunson or Malcolm Brogdon. I think those would be great pieces, and probably somebody to really organize the offense that way. Guys like Tatum aren't always asked to initiate the offense and get everybody else involved, and they can focus on just scoring from areas that they're comfortable with. Since the Warriors have won the title, the often asked question is, how does Kevin Durant feel about this? And he's gonna come off and say, I like my decision, I'm comfortable with it, I'm happy here in Brooklyn, and he can't really show any signs of, regret. I mean, obviously, right? But I think, though, he should feel that he regrets this decision, since he's gotten there throughout 2020, because he was coming off the Achilles injury in 2021, and this year all he has to show for it is a second round appearance with them. Him recruiting James Harden and then joining forces with Kyrie Irving over known commodities over in Golden State like Steph, Clay, and Dre, has been a big knock on him. I mean, he's been a guy that's proven not to really show a lot of leadership qualities. He's always said that he's just a hooper, and yes, he's the most seamless fit in the NBA, but I think that the fact that he's not the most vocal of players in terms of taking an active role in the huddle in terms of where he wants the organization to go, is going to be a big problem in Brooklyn. Kyrie Irving has proven to be unreliable, whether or not he's really passionate about the game. He's a great philanthropic guy. I mean, he's given back to the community. And when he shows up on the court, I mean, he's been great. He's one of the most gifted players I've ever seen in terms of a handling ability, He can finish with either hand and a great jump shot. But I think that his heart's not truly into basketball, and with that, his inability to be available is not the best for the Nets. I mean, the best ability is availability. That's what I always say. So he picked guys over, like I said, known commodities out in the Bay. And Golden State has proven that they've been able to win before him, with him, and after him. And I think these are really damaging to his legacy moving forward. In other news in the NBA, the Lakers introduced coach Darvin Ham to take over the bench role and lead this new Lakers roster to hopefully better outlook than they've had in recent years. I mean, since their title in 2020, they've flamed out in the first round, and even this year they didn't even make the playoffs at all, let alone the play-in tournament. And he had some really interesting quotes to start off about how Russ has plenty left in the tank, and how this roster has a lot of potential. It just has to be harnessed in the right way. I mean, yeah, I agree that there's a lot here on paper, and we all thought that last year with the acquisition of Russell Westbrook, but I think the thing is you can't coach recklessness out of somebody. Russ is essentially kind of like the Tasmanian devil from Warner Brothers, where he will just go in to the paint and then kind of get stuck, not sure whether he wants to dish or take a very contested shot. And he used to rely on his athleticism, which hasn't been the same due to a couple injuries that he's picked up. And I mean, just overall decision making hasn't been the best, just carelessness with the ball. And his jump shot looked completely broken last year. But it seems like he's going to opt in. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want to pass up on $47 million either. The Lakers don't really have a choice. I mean, the return that they could get in a Russell Westbrook trade would be next to none. They would have to give up things or whatever assets they even have left to get him off their payroll. So he's going to be on the roster. And the other thing I wanted to talk about too was that he was trying to harness the whole power of this lineup, which includes Anthony Davis. And Davis has been a frustrating player. Initially when he came into the league, especially in 2015, I became a huge fan of him just because of what he does on both ends of the floor. I knew Steph was deserving of the 2015 MVP award, but I felt like, with Davis almost breaking the PER record and essentially carrying the Pelicans to the playoffs that year, he deserved some type of votes. I think he definitely got some votes when it was said and done. But ever since, and then his first year with the Lakers, he was phenomenal. I mean, the leading scorer, leading rebounder, led them in blocks, finished first team all defense, and the thing is, though, he's regressed since then in terms of health. He hasn't been available. Harping back to the best ability is availability mantra that I talked about. He doesn't seem to really fight through injuries either. He's been dinged up, and he did suffer a sprained MCL and a sprained foot, which are pretty serious injuries. But the fact that this happens so often is just truly frustrating. And the cherry on top was when he came on podcast saying he hasn't taken a shot since April in terms of shooting a basketball. And I wanted to jump on him initially with that and again talk about how he doesn't have this dog mentality, but I did take some time to absorb it. And then other players who've been in the league like JJ Redick talked about how in the offseason, I mean, you take a step back. I mean, it is a long, intense role, longer if you're talking about the postseason run, but you take some time away and then you work on your fitness and then weights and then you start shooting. And he talked about probably be like 2 months after that where he would be taking shots, Redick would. And I guess this is around the same type of clip where it makes sense. I do know that you need some time away, and he's also coming off of an injury, Davis is, but I hope, though, this offseason he does take advantage and becomes fully healthy. Now he has the full offseason at his disposal. to get right, get healthy. And I expect him to come out hopefully with trying to prove some doubters wrong and restore that kind of confidence, because at one point there was this debate where him and Giannis, like, who would you build a franchise around? I think since then that debate has been left in its tracks for sure. Davis is not reliable and not really as in the same stratosphere as Giannis has proved to be. So, but that doesn't mean he's an incompetent player. He's a very valuable player, and I hope for the Lakers' sake that he can do something and provide some intensity on both sides of the basketball. And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate your likes, your feedback, and a little preview to what we're trying to do moving forward. With the NBA draft coming up, it's going to kick off the NBA offseason, and there's going to be a bunch of trades moving forward with also free agency right around the corner. We're going to be covering that. And at the NFL, with training camp coming, I'm going to give a little bit of a preview division by division of how teams in the league have done to improve their roster and what their potential outlook looks for the 2022 NFL season. Until next time, take care.